Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Donald March. I'm president of Mamaroneck's Historical Society. And tonight, I'd like to present to you our distinguished host, Grace Huntley Pugh, who will be bringing you the 9th annual Old Timers. Gracie?
Thank you, Don. Tonight, I'm holding my hat instead of wearing it. This is the 9th year I've brought the hat along. But now that I've had my cataract eye magic done a couple of weeks ago, I don't need to wear the hat. But if I suddenly put it on, you'll know it's these that are doing it. So I just wanted to explain that to you. We're very excited about this program tonight, and I can hardly take a minute to speak to you because our guests have so much to say. But I just want to remind you that the purpose of our Down Memory Lane is continuity. So we get this feeling of going back in Mamaroneck. Now, we've got tonight 5 guests who are in their 90s. And Fred Wilson is 97, and he's our oldest. So he gets to be first, and he's holding out for 10 minutes. However, I just want to tell Fred and you that I've known Fred a long time, and I know he's stubborn. When my father went up to Plattsburgh in 1917, who should be there also but Fred Wilson from Mamaroneck? My father was from Schenectady at that point. And who did they have as a best friend? George Lyon. That's right. So, going back, Fred, it's yours. Go ahead. Stop.
Okay, thank you very much, Gracie. I didn't hear that you did say I should start. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to stroll down memory lane again with you and with the members of our society, Historical Society. This is my 2nd trip. Yes. And last time I took you down Jefferson Avenue and North Barry Avenue and introduced you to all my playmates and their families along those 2 streets particularly. On our stroll this evening, I will take the Town Federal Savings and Loan along with us, the last only surviving local financial institution left in the village and town of Mamaroneck and the town of Rye. You'll recall it celebrated its 100th anniversary last year. And since I spent 55 years of my life as its CEO and 17 years as its good friend and chairman emeritus, I thought it would be good company and possibly interestingly informative to our members. Actually, it was in January 2nd, to be exact, of 1891, that the Mamaroneck Cooperative Savings and Loan Association was organized at the home of Richard V. Boyd on Prospect Avenue. Actually, at that meeting, there were 9 of 14 charter members, and U.D. Eddy was elected president, the first president. He later refused to serve, but he was elected at that particular meeting. Charles M. Baxter, Sr., was elected secretary. The office selected was Charles M. Baxter's hardware store on Mamaroneck Avenue, which is a building next to the Hook and Ladder house now. And the office was the rear of that store building where they had a potbelly stove for warmth in the wintertime. Salaries at that time was established as $75 per year. And the rent for his office was established at $50 per year. And it's interesting to note that the minutes show that there were 3 of the 9 present who opposed that, thought it was much too high, and refused to make it unanimous after it was approved at 6-3. At that time, there was no seed money required to establish a savings and loan of that kind. The new association was supported very freely by the Union Savings Bank, which had been organized in 1888. 3 years before, and had reached the grand total of $400,000 of assets. The First National Bank, which is known as, and Charlie will know this, as Mr. Brewer's Bank, was also very supportive. They had reached about $1 million in 1891. And all these dedicated men, I won't go through the list because Gracie always hurries me, and I won't go through the list of all those original directors, but I'll name just a few. And all these dedicated and community-minded men realized that we needed more mortgage money in the community. And the banks, realizing that installment thrift, which was the type of savings that the Savings and Loan Association could give, was not a threat to them at all. Installment thrift was a fact that you put $1 a month in for 10, 11, or 12 years, and then the practice was that after the shares matured, the association would recommend that they go to the savings bank or the First National Bank and reinvest their money there for longer term. That's what they did with the maturities. The growth was rather slow, real slow. In 6 months, they had acquired in deposits only $2,500. Yet they had made 2 mortgage loans, one for $900 and one for $1,600. In 1 year, the total assets was $6,100, and 2 more mortgage loans was made. 2 more at $1,000 and $1,500. So his mortgage loans are made in the first year, 4 of them. In 10 years, the total assets was $60,000 and $61,000 in mortgages. They must have set up some reserves. 29 years, they had $277,000 with $260,000 in mortgages. Now, the reason for this slowness in maturity, I'm sure, was the fact that they had no home office, and they had 1 employee, the secretary, and he was the chief executive officer. So that was it. The reason, I say, for these 29 years was no home office and 1 employee. This new association was approved very generously by the Union Savings Bank, which had started in 1888, and they were up to 400,000. I think I'd mentioned that. First National, which is up to 1 million. That's going backwards. I don't want that one. So we come up now to 1920, and let's say this is the second phase. That's the first phase. So in 1920, the phase from 1920 to 1975 was a period. I had just returned from World War I then, 2 years of overseas service in France. I had just come back the fall of the previous year, and returned to my job at the Fifth Avenue Bank. I was an assistant loan clerk, a loan officer at that time. I was married a few months after I came home, and the sudden death of my father in May of 1920, who had been secretary of the association for 12 years, from 1908 to 1920, passed away in a sudden death in May, and the committee from the Savings and Loan Association promptly, and it's a very important committee. I'd like to mention them. Charles M. Baxter Sr., who was still a trustee of the Savings Bank and very important individual at that time. He had been a supervisor in the town of Mamaroneck. He was chief of the fire department for 6 years, chief of the Mamaroneck Fire Department. In 1903 to 1908 was one of the, and then the other one was Daniel Warren, who had been president of the Board of Education in Rhinebeck for so many years, and Burton C. Megan, the most prominent attorney in Mamaroneck at that time and attorney for the Union Savings Bank, came to me and asked me if I would take over the position of my father. Well, from a committee like that, how could one say no? And it didn't take me long to say, yes, I will, and I was elected as director and secretary of the association starting June 1st, 1920. I accepted, and June 1, the association at that time had, I don't have it down here somewhere, I think it was $278,000. That was the start that I made with the Mamaroneck Cooperative Savings and Loan Association. That's when my love affair, as I called it at one talk that I had given before, my love affair with the Savings and Loan Association. I was 24 at that time. She, the association, was 29. She shared 3 offices with me. Prior to that, it had been in real estate offices. And the first office was, as I told you, in the rear of a hardware store. The second office was in the rear of the paragraph office. Then it got into real estate offices. So in 1920, she came into my office at 56 West Boston Post Road. That's in the St. Thomas group of offices, as you all well know. And in 1926, we moved into 60 West Boston Post Road, which was a beautifully set up bank for us. So when the Savings Bank moved out of that 60 West Post Road and into their new building, we, Fred T. Wilson office, and his guest Savings and Loan Association, his tenant, moved in. In 1936, business was moving up Mamaroneck Avenue instead of along the Post Road. We moved to 236 Mamaroneck Avenue, which is the Saskill building, and that is a building which is about where Robert's department store is now. From here on, it must be a chronology of events to meet my time schedule.
Yeah, 1 minute, Mr. Wilson.
I'm sorry, I don't hear.
1 minute.
Only one more minute.
Well, okay. 1935, we federalized, allowing regular savings account, which was start of our work. 1939, this is what I don't like. Federal Home Loan Bank, now we're under, because we are federalized, directed. No, I should say they did direct. Was going to say, first they suggested, no, they directed that we have a home office of our own. We then provided 142 Mamaroneck Ave, which was the old Lundberg shoe store, and Albert Wilson. We traded 2 repossessed houses for that building, and Albert Wilson revamped it to what it is today, the Christian Science Reading Room. That was a beautiful, small banking floor. This is the second phase. I don't know whether they get into it at all. It'll be a chronology. If you want it, I'll do it, and I'll have 2 minutes to do it. Yes?
No.
Okay.
Next year.
Thank you very much, folks.
Later in the program. We have to move on now.
Thank you very much.
Ethel, we have a timekeeper over here.
Thank you for asking me.
Ethel McEtchen.
I'll tell you the little bit that I know, because I was away for about 10 years. But maybe I can remind some of you would know about the hurricane of 39, and the Oriental Yacht Club. The water came up to within 1 foot of the top of the lockers, and the piano was floating. And those marks were there. Do you folks remember? Do you remember them, Fred?
Yes, I do.
And then friends of mine had moved here before I came, and they told me that the theater that we have here in town now used to put on regular plays, and people went in evening clothes to the theater. Today, all you see is jeans.
Sweatshirts, yeah.
Well, Gracie said I should tell you about this, the story about my dog, Wire Haired. I used to take him down to the 10-cent store for and buy him a rubber rat. And a few days later, he went down by himself to pick up a rubber rat. Those were the days we didn't have to have the dogs on a leash. Mm-hmm. And he would go in one door, and the manager would try to throw him out, and he'd come back in the other. And then one woman tried to take him. And another woman said, "Oh, you can't take that dog. He has a collar on him and a license." So they fought over him, and the manager called the police. The police came and took the dog down to the station house. And when we got there to pick him up, the police were feeding him an ice cream cone. Then a few days later, I was at work up in Pleasantville. My mother called the 10-cent store, but Mickey hadn't come in when she expected him. And she asked if Mickey was in, and they said, no, he hasn't come in yet. So that's part of Mamaroneck for me. And there isn't too much else that I can tell about Mamaroneck, though.
Well, I asked you if you'd tell just a brief little bit about the PEO.
Well, I belong to an organization that's called PEO. It's philanthropic and educational. We give money for women to advance in their studies, and we loan out anybody that's within a year of, say, a year or two of graduating at a very a low rate, about 4%. We also give some grants, and we also give to some international people, about 2 or 3 a year from our chapter. We have, I really forget how many chapters throughout the country. It was organized in 1869 by 7 college girls in Iowa, and it's now even international. We have about, I think, 200,000 belonging to it altogether.
Reason I asked Ethel to tell you about the PEO is because ever since I've lived in Mamaroneck, I've known people, women, who belong to it. And that's a long, many, many years. And I could never remember what PEO meant. But I thought it was a wonderful cause. It was just I couldn't remember the name. Well, thank you very much, Ethel. I went to see Ethel. I spent a couple of hours at her house, and she was telling me all about her sloop, the sloop that she and her husband had when they belonged to the Oriental Yacht Club, and picnicking out on Hen Island.
Oh, yes, we went out to Hen Island with my husband and I and another couple, and we had pup tents, and we went out in canoes that time, and we stayed overnight on Hen Island in pup tents.
Thank you very much, both of you. We loved it.
Thank you.
And you can finish, after we got through with this part, come back and finish it.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
And while we're changing places, I brought some pictures to show you. I just thought you might like to see the original owner of Mamaroneck. Not us, not the Indians, the mallard ducks down in Guyon Creek. And I'd like you also to know that the egrets are coming back this week and the swans are looking for a nest.
And Gracie, may I say something?
Yes.
I think at the very beginning, you said that the next 5 speakers are going to be in their 90s.
Yes.
Well, that isn't so. There's one sitting at the table who is not in his 90s, and
Oh, no. That's right. No.
and also
We
there's another
changed
one.
the order. We changed the order.
Here's another one who is not in his 90s.
I know.
The young kid.
Louis Zinga, sir, I learned yesterday, is only 89. I thought he was 90.
Are you
No, there are
88 or
5 in their
89?
90s. And this is a good time to straighten this out, because I had expected to have another 90-year-old coming up here with Charlie. I have to tell you, Ethel, who's beautiful, she hasn't got lines all over her face like I have. She is only 91.
Who is that, you?
That's Ethel McFadden, who's just
You
out.
don't look your age.
It's just wonderful. Charlie, I know, is 93. And the other 93er is where? Put your hand up. There he is, Beresford. Beresford Proctor is 93. And Louis is just on the border. And Ethel was 91, so that makes it, right? But Charlie has a lot to tell you, and Frank has a lot to tell you. And all I'm going to do is just put the cover down so you're looking at one of my first pictures of Mamaroneck Harbor. And the only thing I'm going to point out to you, Crescent, my husband, said, they'll never know where that is. And I said, but I know that they'll remember, these old folks will remember, when there was practically an island right down. Grassy knoll. Well, to me it was an island. And this is the steel part projection at Harbor Island on the West Basin. And you could even see Central School in those days. So, and this was the Holtzman's boat. So I thought you might like to see that in the background. Charlie, are you going to start or Frank? Who wants to start?
I don't care, whatever you say.
All right, let Charlie start. And Gloria's the timekeeper.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm on.
Yeah, and this is Charlie Stenman,
Yeah.
93. Going to talk
Thank
to
you.
us.
Excuse me, Miss Pugh, but I'm only 92.
Oh, dear. All right.
It's all right. It's
I
all
just
right.
gotta say-
Pay no mind.
I have to say just one more thing. When Crescent also said to me, what is the theme of this evening? And I thought, well, it's Mamaroneck, how much we love Mamaroneck. No, that's not. So last night, I couldn't think. This morning, I woke up, and I know what the theme of this is. This is our Let's Hug Mamaroneck. Have you all been hearing about the new in kind of thing that's happening? Give everybody a hug? Well, anyway, we are giving our old folks a hug, and we are giving Mamaroneck a hug. So, Charlie, there's your hug.
Okay. Thank you. My subject this evening is land transportation of people and cargo for the first decade of the 20th century.
Fine.
And now, of course, being able to walk well was much more important than it is today. Children walked to school. There weren't any school buses. Their parents attended to all sorts of errands on foot. Many occupations required a great deal of walking. An example, a laborer might walk 2 miles or more to Quaker Ridge, work all day with a pick and shovel, and then walk home again. No job for a cripple. The New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad carried passengers, freight, the U.S. Mail, and the Adams Express from New York City to New England. 2 trolley lines served Mamaroneck, passenger service only. The Westchester Street Railway on Mamaroneck Avenue ran on Mamaroneck Avenue from the village square to White Plains, where it was possible to transfer to their other lines. The New York and Stamford ran through service between New Rochelle and Stamford, Connecticut, and in the summertime, special cars between New Rochelle and Rye Beach. Both lines ran every 20 minutes from early in the morning till late at night, 7 days a week. Much different from the buses today. Yeah. All the work of transporting people and cargo locally, which the automobiles and trucks do today, was done by draft animals and saddle horses. Many people kept 1 or more horses and wagons for work or pleasure. In wintertime, the snow was not plowed, so sleighs were used in place of wagons. I should also mention that mules and donkeys were used in fewer numbers than horses and wagons. Horses and wagons were for rent by the local livery stables. More, let me see. If time, more, 2 or more feed stores, 2 wagon makers, a wheelwright, a harness maker, and about 5 horseshoers served the horse and wagon trade, just as gas stations and repair shops, parts and supply stores serve the auto trade today. If a horse got sick, a veterinarian attended to him. If he died, there were people to take him away and salvage his hide, hoofs, and other parts that might be useful. This is a vast subject, and time permits me to touch only the high spots. Bicycles were used for both pleasure and going to school or to work. But important changes were on the way. Improved design, materials used, and more efficient methods of manufacture had changed both pleasure cars and trucks from a rich man's toy to what promised to be the principal road vehicle of the future, especially for people who had to answer emergency calls. By 1990, many of the wealthy people had replaced their coaches and horses with one or more automobiles. Coachmen became chauffeurs. Blacksmiths and machinists began to look into auto repair work. Hardware stores began to sell auto parts and supplies. It was not long before curb pumps to supply gasoline were erected, the early predecessors of the service stations we have today. The developments that began in the early days continue today and will probably continue far into the future.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
Yeah, I try. As I said before, it's a vast subject, and I could just touch the high spots. I'm sure that there will be some questions during the question and answer period,
Right.
and we'll do our best to answer them.
Good.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And we'll go on now.
I wonder if Charlie remembers. I wonder if Charlie remembers when there was the automobile company on Fenimore Road. Charlie, do you remember?
You're being asked a question right now.
Charlie, do you remember when the automobile company was on Fenimore Road? Do you recall that, or were you just too young?
An automobile company on
Yes,
Fenimore
they
Road?
made automobiles. It was in the early 1900s. You were just an infant. Okay. No, okay, Charlie.
Okay.
No, you were.
No, I don't recollect that particularly. What was it? Was it
It was
a?
probably about 1905, and you weren't born yet? No.
And neither were you, Gloria. Frank,
Hey, that may have been in the old electric light plant.
I'm told by the control room that it was Pan American Motor Company.
yes, we had a program one time.
Pan American.
Years ago where we talked about it, but I don't remember the details. We'll look it up again.
It did, yeah.
Okay, it's Frank's turn now, Charlie.
This didn't last very long.
You're going to sit here and listen to Frank.
Yeah, okay,
This is
thank
Frank
you.
Comblow. When I've seen Frank Comblow through all the years, he's always Mr. Fire Department to me. And that's what he's going to talk about, the 100th anniversary.
Okay.
Fine.
Not on.
It's fine.
It's on. It's on.
Okay. All right, I want to give you a short chronology of the volunteers' most memorable historic moments from 1891 to 1991. March 1987, initial meeting to discuss the establishment of a volunteer held at John O'Connor's Feed Store, which was on the corner of Franklin Street, don't exist today. It's Waverly Avenue now, and Mamaroneck Avenue. And I think Judge Zingas remembers that, when O'Connor's Feed Store. And on September 15, 1891, a volunteer organized $150 is raised at this organization meeting to purchase an engine from Irvington, New York. On September 25, 1891, plans to purchase the necessary hose were discussed. Fire company officers are elected. In 1986-87, Donnybrook Fire Company is absorbed by volunteers. That company was in back of the volunteer firehouse today, and it was a barn and horses. And I'll show you what I'm. This is the Donnybrook the volunteers observed on top here.
Hold it, Frank. Hold it, Frank. Hold it so that the camera can get it.
No, over here. Where's the camera?
Okay, okay.
1903 and to 1905, Volunteer changed their name from Volunteer Hose Company Number 3 to Volunteer Engine Hose Company Number 3. There was some question how many members you could have in one company, so they put an engine and hose, which was two companies, combined in one. In 1911, Volunteers was the first motorized company in Mamaroneck. In 1912, the village appropriated necessary money to erect a permanent firehouse for the volunteers. In 1913, a new firehouse volunteer be included in the village forward and upward moments for benefit of all its people. William Martin, Morris Thomas, Jerry Manning, William Ebenfeld, and Michael J. O'Neill was the committee. Morris Thomas, maybe some of the old time remember, later on became chief of police in the village of Mamaroneck. He was one of the organizers of volunteers. On March 15, 1915, the volunteer firehouse opened, built over a 2.5-year period at a total cost of $8,500.
Quite a difference, huh?
August 17, 22nd, 1925, Charles Caputo was assistant fire chief of volunteers. He was the first chief to come out of volunteers. Company, I'm not talking about the department. And Mamaroneck participated in the 53rd annual convention of New York State Farmers Association. Haven't had it since.
Will they?
In the early 1930s, volunteers participated in racing. And they were state champs for 3 times in this time period. Dominic Susi became the first fatality in a traffic accident near today's waterworks. What they did that time, we had a racing car, and they worked on it, getting ready to go to races, and when they're going around a bend, I don't know whether the driver lost control or whether he got a blowout, but anyway, he hit a tree, and this young fellow got killed. The driver got hurt, but not seriously. The driver was Mickey Orsini, and later on he became chief of the department.
What year was that? What year was that?
Huh?
What year?
That was 1933. 1933. And in the 1930, volunteer possession of a 1,000-gallon LaFrance triple combination pumper at a cost of $14,500. Today, you pay over $200,000 for an apparatus. On June 20, 1943, volunteer battled the worst fire in this century, and that was the lumber yard on Hoyt Street. The fire burned for 3 days, and we used almost 3 million gallons of water. Volunteer Fire Chief Michael Orsini began the Carnival Mamaroneck Fire Department. He is considered to be the father of both the annual carnival and the parade that we have today, and he was from volunteers. So all the good things started from volunteers.
You're a volunteer.
In 1956, volunteer firefighting Anthony Pocha lost his life at the Winchester Day School. I was captain that year, and I begged him to go home, and he just wouldn't do it, and he passed out. Good fireman. On June 14, 1967, the volunteer Tiger helped battle the cleaning store blaze on Mamaroneck Avenue, which was next to a clothing store, and it was a taxpayer's property, 2 stores. And it was a big wooden building next to it, and they kept that from burning. That was a good, I was chief that year. I wasn't here, I was at the convention. But it was a good stop, very good stop. 1956, June 14, they had the fire. 1967, approval was given to raise solicit funds through the fire department to purchase a new ambulance, and John Condrine, the head of this effort. That was the year I was chief, and we wanted to get it in, and we got it in. And today it paid off. Those fellows make 1,000 calls a year in that ambulance corps. It's a great thing for Mamaroneck. 1978, volunteer fires used a temporary headquarters for the ambulance rescue squad. On February 10, 1983, Taggart assistant battling the worst structural fire of this century at 127 Mamaroneck Avenue. You remember when that big place there? We lost one life there, and my brother James Combler was the chief.
You're talking about where the townhouse was, right?
Right.
Yes.
In 1991, volunteers celebrated 100 years of dedicated service and pledged themselves to the same commitment Mamaroneck has come to expect of them for the next century of service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
Well, I'll show you a couple more pictures while they change places. And I'm going to point this out. This is an unfinished sketch that I had done of the old Lawrence Inn. And the reason I wanted to bring it is because I find that so few people realize that this is the old original John Guyon farmhouse from before the Revolutionary War. So this is the roof line, and if you stand over at this end by the parking lot looking this way, you can see it still. And when I take people down there to look at it, they never can believe it. They just don't believe that there is this farmhouse. So I thought, since it's not going to be there much longer, that you would like to take a little trip down and look at it yourself. Yes. Oh, excuse me. In the meantime, I put another picture up because this is the Inner Harbor and my favorite building, the McArdle building. This I wanted to just show you also. I just don't want to take any talking time to show pictures, but this is just changing time. But I thought you might like to see another view with our tower, and Gracie's Tower, as my friends call it, because I've painted it so many times and helped save it. And then this is cherry blossom time. And here's another one of those, as Gloria calls it, a grassy, but I call it an island. And this is right down where the Orienta Yacht Club is now, and it's all gone. But for you old-timers who used to go there, you must remember how hard it was to get into that club. I'll save this for the next time. Okay, here we are. Judge Singesser, 89, and Beresford Proctor, 93. Why don't you start, Beresford?
Okay.
Age
Well,
before beauty.
Gracie asked me to stir up my memory tank and tell several anecdotes of our early days in Mamaroneck. I have to go further back than that to as a horse is involved. Dad moved us from the city to Harrison Avenue in Harrison, just about across the street from the small church and about a city and a half block north of the railroad. It was a nice house with a large barn and large grounds. It wasn't long before Dad bought himself a thoroughbred trotting mare with a buggy and all the trappings. On nice days, he would like to go for an early morning drive in the Macy Park area, not far up the road. Sometimes some or all of us would be with him. The us in this case is my mom, Brother Gordon, and me. On such days as Easter or Christmas, what a treat to drive down to Mamaroneck to hear the St. Thomas Church bells playing the beautiful hymnal songs, so softly at first, but louder as we approached. Then, on the way home, the anticipation of a nice late breakfast of poached finnan haddie or lamb kidneys and gravy. Dad came from England, you can see. When there was snow on the ground, the stable boy would tie up the shaft of the buggy to the front of a number 5 flexible flyer which we had and hitch the horse to it for a different kind of ride, which was fun. In 1907, Dad moved us to Mamaroneck, into the second house up the hill from the Holy Trinity Catholic Church on the Post Road. At present, the house looks very much like the same as it did then, but a lot of the gingerbread has been taken off and the octagonal summer house is gone. The house now is occupied by O'Neill's funeral home. We were very pleased with everything. The house had an extra kitchen in the basement with a dumbwaiter to take up the food and things to where it was eaten. The house fitted in fine with the horse fitted in fine with the buggy and trappings in the barn in the rear right corner of the plot, and more than enough ground for a large garden was extra. Everything went along fine until the second year, when Gurley, the mare, caught some kind of something that wore her down so that she couldn't stand. The horse doctor rigged up a sling with rope and pulley and attached it to the beam over her stalls so that most of her weight could be eased, but to no avail. It was finally decided that she should be put out of her misery. There was a character in Mamaroneck by the name of Passy who could do almost anything, so he was given the job of disposing of her. When we were away, he had to shoot her, then the big job with ropes and pulleys to pull her out of her stall to the door, then from the door to his wagon, and then to raise her up onto the wagon itself. That was a big job. I never knew what he did with the body. Well, that's enough of that unpleasantness. Our home was just across the Post Road, which was a dirt road in those days, from the Oriental Yacht Club. It was a healthy environment for us kids. We were always doing something healthy, playing tennis, swimming, sailing, rowing, or canoeing. Dad had bought a Swampscott dory to learn to sail and race weekends with the other 6 members of the club who had dories. So we had plenty of sailing. One of the members of the club, who lived on Stewart Avenue in one of the houses across the street from where Gracie lives now, George Gardner Fry, was a very experienced sailor. He had his dory painted black and named Tautog, which was the Indian name for blackfish. One of the years, he shipped his dory and went along with it to Holland to compete with it in the international dory races held in the Zuyder Zee, and he won. That brought him a lot of fame and honor, and made the Oriental Yacht Club famous too. And of course, the name Mamaroneck was given a big boost. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Beresford. Thank you. You all set?
Yes.
Good. Judge Singer, sir?
Thank you, Gracie. I served in our village court for 4 terms, 4 years each. I served for 18 years. I was first elected in 1962. For my first term, immediately after having served 4 years on a village board of trustees. And at that time, the judge was known as a police justice. Today, he's known as the village justice. And the police justice had jurisdiction, of course, over civil as well as criminal cases. And I'm going to confine my talk to the criminal work of that court, which I think you'll find much more interesting. And there's one story that I want to tell that I thought was very amusing. A man from the Bronx came to Mamaroneck to pay a condolence call on one of his buddies who was a caddy at the Wingfoot Golf Club. And before arriving in Mamaroneck, he had made the round of a number of bars in the Bronx. So when he arrived in Mamaroneck, he was pretty drunk. And one of his fellow caddies said to him, "You're in no condition to drive a car. You get in the back seat, and I'll take over, sit in the front seat with the other buddy caddy." And so they proceeded along Horse Street, and when they got to the corner of Horse Street and Mamaroneck Avenue, a police officer came along, and he was rather suspicious of the way the car was being driven. So he walked over and opened the door, and he was overpowered by a strong alcoholic scent. And so he thereupon arrested the driver, charged him with driving while intoxicated. And his lawyer was a fellow from Portchester by the name of Jerome Rosenthal. And Mr. Rosenthal came in, and he said to the jury, "Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client is charged with driving while intoxicated. I don't deny that he was intoxicated. In fact, he was as drunk as a lord, but he wasn't driving." And so the upshot of that case was that that jury wasn't out very long after hearing all the details, and he was acquitted. I had a number of other interesting cases, particularly those involving some of the oil companies that were doing business here in the village of Mamaroneck. Some of the big oil companies, represented, of course, by some of the biggest law firms in New York City. So that was a very interesting experience.
What did the oil companies do? What did the
They
oil
were charged
companies do?
They were charged with violation of the standards having to do with the maintenance of the gas tanks and that sort of thing.
So it's really what we would call now environmental. Yes.
That's what we call it today. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think that's about all I want to say.
I think that now that I have to make my little...
Judge, I'm told that you are still working. I mean, you know, you're a youngster yet. You're
Yes.
not quite 90,
I'm only
but you do go to
89.
work.
I'm only 89.
You're
Well,
only 89,
Yeah.
but you still go to work every
Oh,
day.
yes.
And you walk to
I
work.
walk from my home, which is right near the Hampshire Country Club,
Yeah, on
And I
the
walk-
Cove Road.
Cove Road.
Cove Road, and where's your office?
My office is now on the corner of Fenimore and Waverly.
Fenimore and Waverly, and you walk back and forth daily to work?
Oh, yes, and then
yes, of course, why not?
and after
Doesn't everyone?
several hours in the office, I walk over to the County Trust Company, do my banking,
Yes,
walk over to Village Lunch and have a good hearty lunch,
uh-huh.
and then I walk home.
God bless you.
And what time do you walk home?
Oh, I would say on the average around 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
So that's a good day's work.
Yes.
We've come to a point where I was told yes, now I will wait until about 2 minutes to say it. And then, so,
About the pictures.
yes, I think so too, and then we'll change.
She
because we're going on with the program. So back to the pictures. This is, I thought you might like to see where my studio is, up on Guyon Creek. And this is down here, way past my view. This Lawrence Intercontinental View, as the young people know. But this is way down here. But we look out across at, and I'm sorry to say the trees have now grown up since I painted this picture, but this was Lavinia Brewer's old house. And Beth Hofstetter lives there now. And this was the Bondi's house, and they are moving to another house now over on Soundview Drive. And there are other houses all filled in here, but along here is the bird sanctuary. And this is my studio. But the bird sanctuary to all of us is very important. So you can see why, speaking for the gulls, we're always squawking. We want protection. And this is where that swan's going to be back, hopefully. And the egrets are all coming back now. So, and this, again, everyth's intact here. I really put this out because I wanted to show the entrance into Harbor Island. And this is one of the things that's very vital right now. Harbor Island is in a state of discussion. What's the future of Harbor Island? And I personally hope they do not put a restaurant here, because I think it's so beautiful to come down and swing around and see the trees and see the open space rather than a restaurant. So I...
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Okay. Shall I do it now?
Let me go and see what...
And while she's deciding, I brought this book along because if there are any newcomers here, they might like to... Okay, I'm going to read this now. At 9 o'clock, for those viewers who are watching us live, we are out of time. The French news will be shown next. We, us, the Historical Society, down memory lane, will continue tonight's program. If you would like to see the complete program that we're putting on, please call LMC-TV at 698-6808 or 381-0131. Thank you very much. I'm Gracie Pugh. These are our guests, and this is it. So now we have Leo, and Leo is not going to be slighted.
It's okay, talk.
Oh, because this program can be seen. It's being taped, and so we'll get to see it later, not now. Okay, thank you. This is what?
Is Leo going to speak now?
Yes.
So that you have the complete...
We have everybody's back. We're all intact. We're all waiting, and this is Leo Spinelli, who grew up in Mamaroneck.
Mamaroneck Avenue in the middle 20s. And at the square, the fountain was still there and a flagpole. And in front of where the bakery just had the fire, and right in front of that is where, when they had the feast, St. Vito's had the feast, the bandstand was there and played there every night of the feast. And now when you get down, just about another 30 feet going towards the White Plains, in the middle of the road, on when they had bonfires there, and in the middle of the road. That was for the feast, Halloween. On Halloween, and we have a bonfire maybe 20 feet high. And that was every year they had it there. And when they stopped having it there, they had it on the lot right behind where the bakery is now. And at that time, the curbs were about a foot high. And of course, now they kept building the road up and it disappeared. Now, coming down further, where Sheldrake is, Sheldrake was down another block into the Columbus Park, where Sheldrake was. And one day, this friend of mine was sitting on a sled out there, and there was a fire where Lanza Brothers has a gas station. And it was the last store on your right was a tailor shop. And at that time, the fire company was away. The truck wasn't there, so they came out with the hose with the two wheels on that they used in the when they used to have all these meats. And they came out with that, and they went in front of Richie's, hooked up to the water, and came back again and fought the fire. Because a lot of people, I tell people, they say, well, you weren't old enough to see that. But it was just the case that the fire truck wasn't there, and they had to use this. And now, right across from the Lanza Brothers, there's 3 buildings. The middle building, my aunt had a store in there, and Father Gogoots was the first priest for St. Vito's, lived upstairs on the 3rd floor. That's why I know all the priests that we had here, the pastors, because I happen to be a boy and they happen to live there. And going further down where Richie's is now, that was an empty lot there all the time, and they had carnivals there. And before they had the carnivals there was an old touring car sitting in the middle of that lot, and it had this canvas leather seats on it, but it was all broken. We used to play there. And one day, these 2 colored boys were playing on it, and somebody lit a match in the fire in the tank. It's empty, but it fumes in there, and it caught fire, and the 2 boys burned. That was a terrific disaster. Now, I lived in the 2 houses across from that, where the office building is. There's an empty lot. There were 2 houses there. We lived in the front house, and then we moved to the house in the back, and we lived on the 2nd floor. At that time, we had only 1 stove in the kitchen, and my sister and I were fighting to get close to the fire. And of course, I won, and I have a scar under my chin to show for it. And on the side of the house, where there was supposed to be a garage, but we used to get wood for the stove, and it was quite high. It must have been about 8 or 10 feet high, and we used to play on it. So one day I was up there and I started to come down, and I slipped. And in between the lumber was this wire that they used to put the cement on the houses. And I come down, and the whole 4 fingers split open. I come into the house like that, and I said, "Where?" We went to Dr. Healy's, whose office was where Grace O'Neill's funeral parlor is now. And that's where he went, and he sewed up my fingers. And going down further, where Hess Station is now, there was no road there. That was all empty lot, and Grippo's house was there. And when they built the road and moved it, that house was moved to Hillside. It's on next to it. There's the apartment house on one side and this other house next to it. That was the old Grippo's house that was moved there. Now, in the back of the house on the side, there was a big tree there all the time, and we had a tree house there where the kids used to play. But in the back where the brook went between, where there's old packs there now, and if you remember passing down Jefferson, there was buses that were kept there. Well, the brook used to run between the 2 buildings. And one day, Philly Triple and I decided to go swimming after a rainfall. And lucky that the current took us, and we grabbed the branches, we're hanging on, yelling, and Sonny Grippo happened to be home and ran out there and pulled us in. Otherwise, we would have landed down at the harbor, because that's where it would have taken us. So going up further, we get to where the next office building is. And that was always an empty lot, but it wasn't empty because Ottman, the sand and gravel outfit, had sand and gravel in there. Sometimes it was up to 25, 30 feet high. And a few times when it was empty, they had a carnival in there. And at that time, they had the main attraction was a like a barrel as big as this room here, and they ran motorcycles in. People used to go to Danbury Fair to see these things, and here they used to come to Mamaroneck and show us them. And next to it, across the street where they have that little store there, or an office, is one time when they buried a fellow in there, and it was a tent, and you had to pay to go and see him. I don't know if he stayed down there all the time, but that's where they had it. Going down further, where Twiggy is now, that's another place that they held a carnival. And they had, over there was, they had the main attraction that time was a aluminum pole, 75 feet high, and the fellow was doing things. You go all over to see these things, and these people used to come to us, to Mamaroneck, and show us these things. Now, I forgot, going back of the bakery, I forgot to tell you that every year we used to have these gypsies used to come here, and they used to sell herbs and everything, and that's where they used to station all the time, right on that spot.
Could you tell us more about the gypsies?
Well, we used to call them Indians or gypsies, but they used to sell these herbs, and it was a great thing for those kids, running around that place and watching this grown-ups buying these things.
Were you scared they might steal you?
No, well, we were scared of everything anyway, but that didn't make much difference. See, all right. Now,
I just said that because I was always scared they'd steal
right.
me.
Now, going further down, the cemetery's on the right. Now, next to the cemetery is a brook, small brook, and it ran under Mamaroneck Avenue and through. Now, from that brook to the corner where was Yuba's hotel and bar, there was about 4 stores. So that'll tell you how far it was from the cemetery. And across the street from that is when you went into Winfield Avenue. And I had a picture of that, and I left it at the home. I forgot it. It showed the soapbox derby, but it showed that road in there. Right? But now, I don't know if you want to go into...
How about the circus? The circus...
Well, the circus that always came, and the last circus that they had was where Sarah Newman's is now. It wasn't. Yes. They didn't have too many down this end. But also, where Richie's is, the carnival used to come there too. And they always had a bandstand or a dance floor or boxing in there all the time. And that was part of it. Now, during the time of the elections, Jack Dempsey used to go around and campaign. And one of his greatest things that he used to say was, "I'll fight any man in this crowd." But when he came to Mamaroneck and he saw Tex Fairless and some of these other fellas that were around here, and he says, "I'll beat any woman in this crowd." He refused to say that because he saw this crowd. This is unbelievable. You want to?
Why don't you just tell us, what was at Columbus Park before the park?
Well, all right. All right. Now, when I say that the brook went along between these two buildings and then came around to where the GI Civic Club and made a circle and went always to where the monument is now, the Columbus Monument. And there it made a turn to the left and joined with the Sheldrake River. Now, there was a footbridge there. And when you got over on the other side of the brook, there was a big field. We played football and baseball. Now, one time, that's when I decided never to dive anymore, because I dove in one day in that brook, and when I came up, I had all those stones on my forehead. I said, never again. I was lucky I didn't pass out. I stung, I come up, and I had all these stones in there. But also, now, a lot of people don't know it, but when you get down Howard Avenue, down the end of Howard, there's another big lot where they were talking about putting these modular homes in there. But they didn't do it because it's by the brook. That was another field that we played ball in. And very few people knew that.
Well, where else?
Well, I could go on about other things, but
Gedney Pond, or where did you ice skate?
Gedney's Pond. You want to go into Gedney's Pond? All right, I'll go into Gedney's Pond. Of course, if you went behind on Gertrude and went straight through, you would come out to almost where the entrance to Geddes Pond was. And the right side of, just before you got to Winfield Avenue, on the right was the Triffletti's house. And there was a big drop in the terrain there. And down below was Noletti's lived down there. And the water came right through there because Geddes Pond was a man-made lake. It was the first waterworks in Mamaroneck, and then became the swimming hole. And it was, I don't know if any of you have seen the program we had on that, but anyway, when you went to the right where Triffletti's and they went into Geddes Pond, it was maybe about 500 or 600 feet off this road into there, and it was very bumpy. Very few cars went there, but they did go in there because at them days the wheels were big and they were able to go through. Cut.
Anyway.
Okay.
We have
And
time
somebody else.
for some audience participation, too.
All right.
Thank you, Leo. How about it? Some of you from the audience, please. Nothing? Mary Lou Judas? Nothing?
You know, I
Nobody?
was curious, Gracie, I was curious about one thing. Fred Wilson said that the salary, I think, for the first year that the savings and loan started was $75 a year. Then you started in 1920. Was the salary much greater then?
Yeah, $1,500 a year.
Oh, okay. I was curious about that.
I have some more things that I'd like to tell you, too, since we do have till 9:30. I'd like to turn to one of these pictures, this one. Because this is sailing into Mamaroneck Harbor, and this is the beach pavilion. And the beach pavilion, I'll tell you about, when we moved to Mamaroneck in 1947, Mrs. Leibeiss, Mrs. Edward Leibeiss, Fritzie Leibeiss, was the realtor. She had an ad in the New York Times, and we responded. And we bought our house. But I then became good friends with Mrs. Leibeiss, who was, I have clippings about her. She was a stupendous woman. And those of you in real estate, Fred, you must remember a lot about Mrs. Leibeiss.
I know her very well. She lived on Beach Avenue. She had an office on Mamaroneck Avenue right near Dr. Emmeline's drugstore at the time.
Yes.
Between the Hook and Ladder house and that drugstore. Yeah.
And so when we bought our house, who did we get our mortgage through? Right there. You didn't hear it? Anyway, we made my father come with us to get the mortgage because he looked good. He looked prosperous. And he had a good-looking hand-tailored tweed coat and a nice big camera, and we thought they'll give us a mortgage if they see we've got somebody behind us. So that's what the three of us, Gus and me, descended on Fred Wilson. We got the mortgage. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you about
Our
this.
office was in the building that's still there, next to the fire that's still standing. And one day somebody parked the car, she didn't like it, and she went out there and she bawled the person out. Why? And we were all watching it. And then what does they do? The person went into her office. we all said, oh my God. She wanted to buy a house. She went into her office.
Well, I don't remember going to her office. I think our deal was pretty quick because there were other people. But I do remember going to get that mortgage. And I do remember where she lived then. She, at that point, lived up near the Daniel Warren School. And she had a little white house. So she, and her husband had died. Anyway, Edward Leibeiss was the architect for this beach pavilion that they are talking about refurbishing now. And I think he would be very grateful that this is happening. Of course, I don't know if they've decided what they're going to do. I can't help but wish it, besides being a wonderful place for recreation, it could also have exhibits and things like that, too. But I thought we would like to know about that. And Edward Levice was also one of the people who was very much in favor of having the sewage treatment tower where it is now. That was a big fight back in 1928. And he was very influential in telling them that it wouldn't be bad, that they could have stores there, that they wouldn't even have to have a tower. But all I can say is thank God they have the tower, because the rest of us go to Italy, we go every place in the world to see towers, and here we had one right in our own front yard. And it's so wonderful that it's lit now. But those were,
And
yes.
thanks to you, Gracie, it's still there and it is lit. And
Well,
it does look beautiful.
I think so too. And that when I get downhearted, I want to tell you, if I walk down the street from St. Thomas, I look up at that tower and I say, thank you, God. And I don't think I showed this before, did I? I brought this picture because this is Nick
Hold it
Bissell's
still.
boat.
Hold it
Yes, here we are.
Whose boat?
Nick Bissell. Nick Bissell died last year. But I just thought it's such a beautiful picture. He was an architect that helped us so much with the Landmarks Advisory Committee, and he helped me in saving that tower and other places that we worked on. He helped in having the Methodist Church landmark, where we're going to be having a meeting in the end of this month. And it's a very exciting thing. But Nick was a wonderful, talking about volunteerism, Nick was #1 in the architecture world of helping anybody with any cause, as long as it had to do with architecture, as long as he didn't have to be on the committee, as long as he didn't have to go to meetings. But he was wonderful at doing. Roz Wood is looking at me, and I can say, you agree, don't you, Roz? Because Nick worked very much with Shore Acres, and Dave Kovaleski, you're going to be the vice president of the Shore Acres Club now, so you'll know about it too. Okay. Well, I just wanted to tell you about that. I have also I had another picture, but I guess I don't find it. Anyway, I did bring along the picture of the cherry trees, the original cherry tree picture that they put in the Daily Times, because Bob Arbor was afraid they'd only have 80 trees. They got 262 trees because of this picture. It's buried down in here someplace. And I always like to bring this map of Mamaroneck, because there's always somebody that doesn't know where the town of Rye ends and the town of Mamaroneck begins, and it's the Mamaroneck River. And it doesn't show up too well on here. So I once drew this back 9 years ago when we started this program, showing the Mamaroneck River coming down here, town of Rye and town of Mamaroneck. So, would you like to say goodbye? I'll say goodbye first. I'm Gracie Pugh, and I thank you. It's been a great evening, and I hope you all enjoyed it.
I just want to thank each and every one of our distinguished senior citizens for coming out tonight and sharing their memories on our show Down Memory Lane. I'd like to remind each and every one of you that on Wednesday, April the 29th, we will be doing our second program of the month. We invite you to attend, and we would like you to come to the United Methodist Church on the Post Road. We'll be giving you a guided tour of that church and giving you its history. Till that time, I bid you all a fond good night.